Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar on design of additional road features and street furniture. In this webinar, we shall be mainly dealing with road signage, marking and lighting plans. Before we get started, let us try to understand what will be our learning objectives and key takeaway points from this webinar. By the end of this webinar, you will be able to understand what is meant by street furniture, what are the classifications, what are the basic design principles involved in the provision. Also, you should be having some surface knowledge on the intelligent transport system and what are the advancements going on in this field and what will be the career opportunities that will be available for those who aspire to gain expertise in this field. So let's get started with this. So this shall be the contents for today's webinar. Firstly, we shall look at the overview and importance of street furniture and road marking and get a general idea on what it is. And then we'll look at the road classifications and even the design theory behind that and major concepts involved in developing a signage plan. And then we'll move to road marking. We'll understand what are the classifications and what are the design principles and due considerations that has to be made to prepare a marking plan. And then we will look into a few of the typical road marking layouts where I'll try to explain some key elements on the provision of markings. And then I'll take you through a small illustration on how to develop on the road signage plan, road marking plan, and a street lighting plan. We'll take you through a small case study on signage plan, marking plan, and street layout, street lighting layout. And at the end, we will see what are the evolutions in this field, what are the advancements like intelligent transport system, and at the end, we'll look at the career paths and job opportunities available in this industry. Okay. Uh, yeah. What is street furniture? It is usually a collection of objects and equipments which are installed all along the road and it at its appropriate locations as per the requirement of the road, which will promote road safety. That means wherever we place a street furniture, it should enhance the safety of the road users. For example, let's say providing a retro-reflective crash barriers at the structure and eye embankments, pedestrian guardrails at the footways. These are all the street furnitures which are provided for the safety of the road users. And it can also enhance the efficiency of the highway operations and the traffic flow also can be controlled using street furnitures like traffic signals, traffic signs, and markings as well. We shall look into the details of these things in the coming slides. And it will also provide the required warnings, the information, and also the warnings to the drivers about the hazards that can come along in their travel way. Sometimes these hazards may be designed and sometimes it may be because of the negligence of the designers or maybe because of the layout constraints. We'll get into that in detail when we come to the development of signage plans. And there can be information signs and advanced directional signs which provides information on which direction they are leading to, and they can take appropriate decisions especially at a few junction locations. There can be a few street furnitures like the waste collection bins, which can be used as an aid to for the routine maintenance of the roads. Okay, these are the traffic lights or traffic signals. These are the equipments which are provided mainly at the junctions in order to control the traffic movement coming from different approach roads. These traffic lights are designed with facing, and facing means the time intervals that are provided for each arm's traffic movement. These facings are not picked up randomly, these are arrived upon careful traffic data analysis to provide a reasonable queue length. It may not be a zero queue length at all the times, depending upon the saturation of the junction. The queue length may increase or decrease, and even the facing may alter to accommodate the capacity of the junction. And traffic signals are also essential tools to control the pedestrian movement at the crossing locations. And whenever there is a combination of pedestrian movement and vehicular movement, the traffic facing of the signals should be synchronized in order to create a smooth flow of the traffic. Okay, these are the traffic signs which are provided all along the road, no matter what category it is. The intensity or the density of the signs placement might vary depending on the importance and the traffic requirements. Some of the traffic signs will have legislative validation, meaning that if the driver doesn't follow the information conveyed through the signs, it may turn out to be a punishable offense. For example, if the speed limit is specified as 30 and if a driver is traveling at a speed of 50, if he gets caught through an interceptor or by a traffic police, he'll be penalized for the violation. The same thing applies for the vehicles parked at a no parking zones, or maybe a violation of a traffic movement on a mandatory one-way traffics, one-way traffic routes. And they also provide sometimes warnings to the drivers, like school zones ahead, road humps, sharp curves, steep gradients, or maybe some unmanned railway crossings, as you can see in the slide. There's an example where a sign is shown where there's no manning or the gate provided for the railway crossing, and the driver has to be careful when while crossing it. Advanced directional signs are usually accompanied with the destination names and directional arrows along with the distance from the current location. Okay, street lighting. What does it do? It provides illumination to the road users at night, not just at night, but also at dark conditions. What do you mean by the dark conditions? Dark conditions are like the tunnels or maybe a long underpasses where the provision of natural light is very difficult. Just imagine there's no lighting inside a tunnel and you're driving with your headlight illumination. It's how unsafe that is to imagine. Lighting is mainly required where there shall be a conflicting movements, like in junctions where there are several conflicting movements from the vehicles, or in the urban centers where there can be a potential pedestrian movements. At rural highways, uh, SKs locations can be provided with street lighting, because most of the time you don't need illumination because there's no much of conflict movements, and just the headlights of the vehicles and along with retroreflective signs and markings can provide sufficient safety for the road user. What are these road studs? In a layman's term, if you see, it can be called as cat eyes, the eyes that blink in the dark. These are placed all along the road as a guide to the drivers. It can act as a lane marking guidance to maintain the lane discipline. It can act as a guidance for the pedestrians at the uncontrolled pedestrian crossings or even at the controlled pedestrian crossings as well. Road studs can be of different types. They can be depressible, non-depressible, depending upon the type of the material that has been provided. They can be permanent or temporary. These temporary studs are provided mainly on the diversion routes, where there any construction is going on the main route. It can also be classified as a single-sided retroreflection with different photometric requirements and night visibility requirements. If you can see in the slide, there are four different studs, road studs, which has been placed. Every road stud has got its own differences, like single side retroreflection, double side retroreflection. The single side retroreflection is used, studs are used when there is a unidirectional traffic flow, and Dual side retroreflective road starts are used when you anticipate opposing traffic as well as the ongoing traffic. These objects can be easily seen in our day-to-day travel. These are called as bollards. Uh, these are the posts or the retroreflective or illuminated posts. Sometimes an inherent retroreflectivity is being used. Sometimes they have to be illuminated. They usually try to avoid the traffic movement at specific locations they are used. They can be placed permanently along footways or cycleways and the islands, especially the refuge islands at the crossing locations, to avoid any unintentional accidents that might happen by curb overruns or by the large vehicles. This will improve safety for the pedestrian and cyclists. They can also be used as a temporary objects at diversions or at where a restriction of travel has to be imposed temporarily. They can be illuminated as a kind of retroreflective bollards at sharp turns as well, where the travel has to be, where the driver needs to be warned that a sharp turning is ahead. Now let's come to the road marking. Road markings usually acts as a guidance to the road users. It provides some extra emphasis um, along with the road signs, along with the traffic signs. Lane markings will provide guidance to maintain lane discipline. And double yellow lines, as you can see in the slide, this double yellow lines indicates that it is a no overtaking zone. Giveaway lines are provided usually at the roundabouts or at great junctions, stating that the priority has to be given to the vehicles on the major road or circulatory carriageway, meaning that the driver needs to slow down at the giveaway line and then proceed with the caution, giving priority to the vehicles which are already traveling on the major road. Directional arrows are also placed. If you can see a few directional arrows on the roundabout picture on the slide, this shows possible turning movements that are allowed for the vehicles. And at the last picture, if you see that channelizing island has been provided through marking. Sometimes it is not feasible enough to provide a physical island because that road might scarcely but sometimes be used by large vehicles like articulated trucks, which might create overrun on the physical island. So only for those vehicles, to make it mountable, we can just provide a channelizing island through marking. These are the block markings, which indicates that it should not be used unless if the vehicle requires it for the clear turning. Road markings are very useful tools to guide the road users, since these objects are placed along the travel path of the driver, and it will also provide guidance without distracting the driver's concentration on the road because he need not turn or tilt his head to look at the information. Markings are provided even for the cycleway and the pedestrian guidance as well, like zebra crossings, which are called as block markings, and cycleway markings, which are provided for the dedicated cycleways. Now, let us see how these road signs are classified. First among this classification is mandatory or regulatory signs. These are the signs which are to be compulsorily followed by the road users. Any violation of these mandatory signs would result in a punishable offense. These mandatory signs may further be subdivided into prohibitory or regulatory signs, operational control signs, and compulsory directional controls. So what are these prohibitory or regulatory signs? These are the signs which prohibits the drivers from doing something which is not desirable to the road layout, like the U-turns at a median cuts. Sometimes the U-turn may have to be prohibited since because of the traffic movements that might cause any conflicts or severity like accidents. And some of the urban areas, the parking restrictions will be held and a prohibition on parking, which is no parking boards can be seen. And sometimes the travel itself is banned, like one-way traffic. That means that only one way of the traffic is allowed, and the other way, if done, will be a punishable offense. Next comes the operational control ones. These operational control ones or control signs are nothing but they are the signs which are provided as a safe guidance for smooth operations, like speed limits. These speed limits are not just randomly picked up, these are arrived based on the design of the roadway feature itself and by carefully analyzing the surrounding conflicting movements of the vehicles and pedestrians. For example, a road may be very straight in a stretch with no curves or anything, and its geometric parameter may be allowing a safe operating speed as 100 kmph. But if there are at grade junctions or merging traffic or pedestrian crossings, the speed limit should be reduced to maintain safety of the road users. Or sometimes even the design constraint or lack of visibility will also reduce the design speeds. Compulsory directional signs are those signs where the directions will be imposed on you, like left only or right only, ahead only. These are done carefully by analyzing the entire network and the traffic flow characteristics. Next among this category is the cautionary or the warning signs. These are the signs which are placed before a hazard, I can say. This may be a designed hazard, like a sharp turn ahead, steep gradient ahead. These are designed and kept within the applicable standards, but however, a driver needs to be warned that he needs to take a bit of caution. There can be informatory signs as well. These are the guiding signs. There can be two types of the informatory signs. One can be a facility information like the information on the hospital in the vicinity or the restaurants in the vicinity, parking areas, rest areas available in the vicinity, or maybe a direction information which will show you on the destinations and the distances, direction on which it has to be led. These are the examples for them. Design theory and principles of a signage plan. What are the design theory or the principles that needs to be kept in mind while we develop a design plan? It needs to fulfill a need. For example, if we are providing a sign which states go slow, school zone ahead, that needs to fulfill its need because the school has to be at an appropriate distance, or our placement of the signage has to be at an appropriate distance from the school so that the driver is warned well in advance so that he can take caution, slow down, and create no hazard at the traveling moment. And it should seek a proper attention from the road users, meaning that the contrast of a background color and the sign color should be well enough accompanied to catch the complete attention of the road user. At the same time, it should not create any reflection or a glare which would affect driver's vision. This reflection and glare can be avoided using appropriate materials which has a proper retroreflective index. And the message that the signs convey should be simple and clear. It should have lesser text, more of a symbols and figures, and these symbols and figures used on the traffic signs should be universally understood. It should not be of a context of a regional background. Like for example, if A restaurant is universally identified by a pair of forks. Text used in the directional and information signs should have information in both official accredited national language and maybe a state language as well. It should always be placed at an appropriate location where it provides adequate response time to the road users. How are these basic requirements achieved? One is through the designing the road layout and signs in an efficient manner. What is meant by this? It means that the design of the road layout should be seamless as far as possible with minimum restrictions on the road users. All locations for the placement of the signs to be identified and finalized upon discussion with the stakeholders as well. It doesn't needs to be finalized just by the requirements of the codes and standards. We need to have a stakeholder discussions as well to finalize especially the locations of it. For example, provision of a pedestrian crossing facility at an urban center needs to be discussed with the adjoining traders or the schools or the colleges where they would actually require a crossing. A study on a survey can also be done to assess on the desired line of the crossings. Then comes the placement of the signs. It should always be appropriately placed so that the message that we intend to convey through our road sign is conveyed well in advance to the road user to take appropriate decisions at the right time. Also, the lateral clearances and size should be sufficient enough to match with the eye height of the driver, and it should also be clearly legible for the sight of the driver. Some of the mandatory signs like keep left on traffic islands, they are normally mounted so that the bottom edge of the sign um, is about a meter above the paved surface. When several signs are to be placed along the same section, a proper care should be taken so that they do not obstruct each other from the visibility of the driver. The As per the codal provisions, the location of the sign should be a minimum of 0.6 times the speed. Here we take 85th percentile of the speed because most of the in because of the heterogeneous traffic conditions in India, mostly our design speed is usually 85th percentile of what we actually design for. And sometimes signs are normally erected on the left side, but because our travel way is on the left, and sometimes extra emphasis a second sign may also be placed on the right side as well. This is especially helpful when it comes to a left hand curves. Sorry. Yeah. Next comes the operational ability of the sign. This has to be checked by conducting random checks through the enforcement agencies, like a speed limit sign placed. Unless if it has any random speed checks of the vehicles, it becomes non-operational over a period. Like functional evaluation of this road sign should be done at determined at a regular periodic intervals or maybe even at random intervals, whether certain signs needs to be changed to meet the current traffic. Like for example, if we post a speed of a 60 kilometer per hour on a stretch and the traffic has increased, so the speed limit has come down because of the increased volume on the road. So it needs to be replaced, like 60 kilometer per hour speed limit post has to be replaced using maybe say 40. And how do we do that? We do that through an analysis like speed delay surveys or CCTV cameras or using interceptive radars to assess the speed of the vehicles traveling on it. A fully operational sign will always provide enhanced safety to the road users. In the same time, if it is not completely operational, it might lead to misguiding the drivers as well. Then comes the maintenance of these signs. They should always be maintained in terms of legibility and visibility of the sign. It should always be clean, legible, rust free. It should always be properly mounted to its true position. They should be in a commanding position to earn the respect of the drivers.